Hi, welcome to another week of Gospel Preview. My name is Reverend Alex. I'm the Director of Formation here at Trinity Cathedral, and joining me is Eileen Harvey-Qualset.
Good morning. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Eileen. And so we have a special Gospel Preview this week. Um, for this Sunday at Trinity Cathedral, we are celebrating Recovery Sunday. This is a annual celebration we do sometime in the fall. The date moves around because it's a date that we choose, where we honor and celebrate people who have gone on or are currently on a journey towards sobriety and recovery from addiction. And so this year we chose October 19th. October 19th to be that day because the day before, October 18th, is St. Luke's feast day. St. Luke, the great author of the Gospel of Luke. It is his feast day on the 18th, which made it convenient to use the readings assigned to that feast day for this Sunday. So the Gospel I'm going to read is not what would normally be in the lectionary for October 19th. This is the Gospel for St. Luke's feast day, and I will share it now. It's Luke chapter 4, verses 14 to 21. I'll go ahead and read this. I invite you, Eileen, and I will myself try to pay attention to any word, phrase, or image that really jumps out and hooks us, you. Luke chapter 4. Jesus, filled with the power of the Spirit, returned to Galilee, and a report about him spread through all the surrounding country. He began to teach in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll, found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." Hmm. So, Eileen, I wonder if there's a word or phrase that stands out to you.
To let the oppressed go free.
I don't know if what honestly stood out to me was that word because in that same, quote from Isaiah. I don't know, there was something that struck me about the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. I don't know why. There was something about mm, it suggested to me a relationship between saying yes to the mission and being anointed by God for the mission. Something like that. I felt like explaining because it's a weird word for me to get stuck on or, catch with the because. Do you want to talk about let the oppressed go free?
Well, this is one of those pieces of scripture that puzzles me a bit.
Hmm.
Um, so in Isaiah, yeah, the
Yeah.
thing that he said, it is written, and there's the two verses that sent me to proclaim freedom, recovery of the sight, set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing, but
Hmm.
those things didn't happen,
Hmm.
and they still have not happened.
Hmm.
And so this is one that I've always I believe that the Spirit of the Lord came on him and anointed him to proclaim good news, and to proclaim freedom, but yet we haven't been able to get that accomplished in, these
Sure.
generations. So, when he says, so this is fulfilled, it's like, well, um, okay, now what? Shouldn't things be happening? So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I really appreciate that, because that you mentioned it was like, oh, that's different. Uh,
Yeah, it stood out to me this time about this relationship. Um, yeah. Hmm. I'm thinking about what you said, which is very, I think, right on. It's great. You're right. Like, um, they have certainly not happened in a finished form. So let me start with that response. They have certainly not happened in a finished form. All the oppressed are not free. All those who are blind are not given sight. All those who are captive, um, have not been released. All those things are very true. They are not done in a um, some sort of finished state, complete state. I don't know how else to phrase that. Universal state.
mhm.
That is certainly true. It has, and we know that, of course, in the unfolding of history and time, oppressed people have been set free. Those who have been captive have been released. So as a ongoing reality, it's ongoing. Yeah, it's a reality of ongoingness. It's not a state of finality. It's not everyone in some sense. Where was I going with that? I guess that was like my first reaction thought as I heard that, just to agree with you.
Well, and
Then
what
the
just
other kind of thought,
I was saying, well, what just struck me, which probably
yeah,
should have struck me before,
yeah,
is that as we talk about being healed,
yeah,
it may not mean our cancer is gone, but we
mm,
may have moved into a state of acceptance or acknowledgement, and looking forward to the difficulties that are going to come and how we're going to overcome them. And so, proclaiming freedom for the prisoners, it's very likely a
maybe, yeah,
spiritual,
right,
freedom.
yep,
And that even though, maybe it's not just a physically blind person, maybe it's someone who doesn't understand or comprehend. Because I mean, there are a lot of times I'm
sure,
like, wow, I never saw that coming,
right.
you know. So, so that makes a little more sense to me.
There's some of that certainly that is applicable. I agree fully. I mean, some of our um, people who live with disabilities who comment on scripture sometimes have a point about like uh, for some of them, they don't healing doesn't look like having their disability removed, right? Some people who are blind are happy to be blind, right? That I mean, it has become such a part of their personality and selfhood that to change that would be to change themselves,
Hmm.
in some fundamental way, such that like for them, that isn't the prayer anymore, right? The
Hmm.
prayer isn't give me sight, God. Can one day please give me sight or the ability to walk or etc. Right?
Hmm.
And I'm not speaking for all people with disabilities, but I do know I've read commentators on scripture from the perspective of someone living with some sort of disability, naming like kind of what you're saying, like the perhaps it isn't about literally becoming losing. It's not literally about the change of state from not having physical sight to having sight,
Hmm.
because sometimes that wouldn't even be desirable, you know.
Hmm.
I think too about the release of the captives. Um, that's good news as long as we're not talking about a jailbreak of a bunch of people who have committed heinous crimes, right? Like, And so it's not really because essentially this is good news, right? It's
Mhm.
both the gospel and we take from the context of this specific gospel that he's talking about good news. He's talking about this is a good thing. And so certainly we would not want to suggest that the good news is that people who have committed heinous, terrible crimes don't have to deal with consequences, right?
Mhm.
Can be
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
set free. So there is some, I think you're right that some of it is needing to read it from a more, I don't know what the right word is. There's a word that I don't want to use. But reading it in a larger understanding than just literal.
Hmm.
That's what I want to say. Reading it from a larger perspective than just literal.
Hmm.
So there's some of that. I also think you bring up a good point about how Christians, how the writer of the author Luke, and certainly the author Matthew, uh, understood or understand um, the fulfillment of Scripture. Luke and Matthew, and from them, many Christians today, um, I think sometimes I mean, not I think, definitely read passages in Isaiah particularly, and the answer is that Jesus fulfills that scripture reading, right? That somehow there's a scripture reading like the one we just like in this gospel from Isaiah, and they're often from Isaiah. Isaiah seemed to be a kind of favored prophet amongst the Jesus movement. People really liked Isaiah, it seems. Um, and um, the insinuation, at least today amongst Christians, can sometimes be Isaiah was foretelling this person Jesus, right? Um, and something that I think is mm, at minimum helpful in our relationship with our Jewish neighbors, but I think also deeper, more helpful for our theology, is to recognize that Isaiah was not talking about Jesus, right? Um, in some sort of sense of Isaiah was not talking about Jesus in some sort of sense of Isaiah was sitting around in whatever year BCE and got some vision from God of, hey, there's going to be this guy Jesus that comes in a couple thousand years or a couple hundred years. Don't quote me right now on the timeline
Timeline.
between Isaiah and Jesus. That's not fresh in my brain at the moment. But like, um, and this is how some Christians view it, right? Like Isaiah sat there, God gave Isaiah some vision or some communication that there's going to be some guy Jesus and he's going to be born of a virgin and he's going to have all these qualities. There's this motif in the book of Isaiah about a suffering servant. And that like takes up several chapters of Isaiah talking about this suffering servant. And as Christians, sort of and to be fair, aided by Matthew and Luke, the writers, sort of see the suffering servant as Jesus.
Mhm.
Reading Isaiah within Isaiah's own, you know, ignoring the New Testament for a minute, Isaiah pretty clearly thought of the suffering servant as the people of Judah, as the people of Israel, the Hebrews collectively, and maybe, you know, putting some spike into it, the faithful Hebrews, Hebrews who were really following God, were going to sort of like emblematically embody the suffering servant motif.
Mhm.
It was, if you read Isaiah itself, the suffering servant seems to refer more to a collective experience rather than an individual who's going to come sometime in the future,
Okay.
right? But you're right. But Matthew and Luke which is why a lot of Christians, I think, today have read it this way, um, talk a lot about how Jesus does fulfill the scriptures of Isaiah. So
Mhm.
I've done this preamble to kind of talk about, I don't think they, I mean, I don't really know what Luke and Matthew meant because I don't know the two of them. They're dead. I can't interview them. I have the words written on the page just like you and everyone else has, right? So I don't really know what did they really think. I have no clue what they really thought. I think it is problematic to understand it as so Isaiah predicted that one day a guy would come and he would set the captive free and he would restore sight to the blind and he would let the oppressed go free. And that person is Jesus. And he's finally here and he's come. I think that too easily leads into a big word that's called supersessionism, which is sort of this idea that like we don't really need the Jewish faith anymore because now Jesus came. Right. And
Hmm.
so Jesus or Christianity supersessionism, supersedes Judaism. It's
Hmm.
kind of this idea that Judaism is kind of like, um, yeah, we needed it for a while. It comes from some of that New Testament
Hmm.
writing that's problematic, where it's like you had the law and you needed the law for a while, but now Jesus is here and you don't need that stinking law anymore. Right. Which is
Yeah. And
problematic.
it is. And
Yeah.
but I believe
Yeah.
that also. It
Sure.
was like somebody like in EFM,
Yeah.
Education for Ministry. It's like,
Yeah.
why do I have to read this? It doesn't have anything to do with Jesus. Jesus came and that's all that matters. And it took it took a long time for me to recognize I need to know this to understand what's happening, but it's like not knowing your history.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful and amazing and
Yeah.
but yeah, I was yeah.
I wonder what will you share do you want to share like what was that journey like for you a little bit more? What was that moment? I mean, it may not have been one moment, but what was it that tipped you over the edge from one camp to the where you kind of realized actually this whole Old Testament is important and it is valuable.
So EFM, for those who don't know, is a 4-year program.
Hmm.
And the first year is the Hebrew scriptures.
Yep.
And so we after we wrapped up that first year and people are saying, well, what did you think about this year? I said, well, I think the best thing is I'll never have to read it again.
Yeah.
Because it's,
Uh,
I did not understand that it was like the story of the development of culture.
yeah.
These are little tiny isolated groups of people trying to struggle through how do we come together and what's
Yeah.
important. And so um, there's a lot of put down of women, there's a lot of put
Yep.
down of poor people, there's a lot of
Sure.
horrifying battles and wars
Yep.
and I just thought why would anybody turn to this? And
Mm.
there's sections in there on how you're supposed to live your life. And if you don't live it this way, then your neighbors are supposed to kill you. It was
Yeah.
just like, I don't get this at all.
Yeah.
So then there was 3 more years of EFM where if I deigned to comment on the Old Testament, it was pretty snotty. And so it was about, I don't know, it was about a year afterwards. And I can't remember what
After your final year.
after my final year. So like 5 years
Yeah.
of of 4 years of refusing to look at it at all. And
Yeah.
then that fifth year, starting to I found there was poetry here,
Mhm.
and there was beauty here. And
Yeah.
that now that I understood more about my own Christianity, I could look back and see why that was important. So Um, it was probably 7 years from start to finish. And even
Yeah.
now, at times when I look at it, I'm like, oh, good Lord, you know,
Yeah,
really,
yeah. And that's okay. To be
yeah,
fair, Jewish people do the same thing.
I know.
They have
Yeah.
a
My
very different
grandson,
relationship to scripture than we do. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
And my grandson, who's Jewish, is
Yeah.
and bar mitzvah and everything. We've
Right.
had some wonderful talks about some
Yeah.
of the about some of the Hebrew scriptures and where they fit in. and he's 14 years old, and he'll quote something to me that is so incredibly beautiful that I have never remembered reading, and I'll
Sure.
go back to that. So it's been quite a a voyage, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And
it's been quite a voyage. Yeah.
I commend you for going on that voyage because so
Yeah.
many people, so many Christians particularly don't,
Mm,
right? We don't. Jesus came, we're done with it. We can sort of ignore all that old stuff.
mm-hmm.
Um, and sadly, I think what that leads to is a really distant relationship with our Jewish brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Of why would they believe this stuff? Why would they follow that, Torah and all those rules and et cetera, et cetera?
And
They don't.
I can't pick out one event, but there have been
Sure.
times that it's like, oh, well, if I didn't know the background of that was in the Old Testament,
Yeah.
I've been misunderstanding that.
Yeah.
And that, that's like, oh, okay, wait, that's not that there's a different way to translate that word, and
Right.
it means this to us now, but then it only meant
Yeah.
this.
The mother.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's been about absolutely having that history. Yes, absolutely. And I'm having the tug that it's not really for you, but for anyone who's watching this later, like it's also the case that um the relationship God has to humanity and to the Jewish people in particular is not ended by the person Jesus.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right? That the vision, I mean, we do get elsewhere in the New Testament this vision and the Old Testament for sure, but this vision that it's yes, God brings together the Jews and the Gentiles and they come into relationship with God, but at no point is it described that the Jews stop being Jews or the Gentiles stop being Gentiles, right? And in fact, this was a big conflict in the early church where it was this big question of do people who convert to Christianity, who want to follow Jesus, do they need to be circumcised? In other
Hmm.
words, do they need to follow Jewish law
Hmm.
and or not, right? And this is like a fight going on between Paul and Peter and like I'm talking early church, and you can find it in some of the letters and certainly in the book of Acts. You can find
Hmm.
this kind of dispute going on of like do they need to? And the conclusion was they don't. The conclusion was no, actually, the Gentiles get to be Gentiles, and the Jewish people get to be Jewish people, and they don't have to stop being whatever their cultural heritage is, their identity is, because God is the God of all of them, and God is bringing them all together into one humanity, and it's not about Gentiles becoming Jews or Jews becoming Gentiles, right?
Hmm.
And so I just want to honor some of that as we wade into these tricky waters of you've named it very well. Jesus said, I fulfilled the scripture, but he kind of didn't. And what's that about? And what's that about? And what's going on there?
Yeah.
So I give that, I say all those comments to ponder. If Jesus is not some sort of, um, how do I say it? Like, if when Isaiah wrote these words about the Spirit of the God has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, release to the captive, sight to the blind, all these things, right, that it says here. When Isaiah wrote them, if we say Isaiah didn't mean Jesus, wasn't talking about Jesus when he wrote those words, wasn't picturing this guy Jesus coming. But Jesus says, today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. I'm gonna I want to hold those two things in tension and ask, what does that, I don't know, what does that do for us if we hold both of those to be true? Hmm.
Well, I think the thing that Jesus brings
Mm-hmm.
is freedom
Yes.
and good news.
Yes.
And he was that those proclamations were different than what other people had said.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, I think often those words are married with, if you do this, if you do that, if you, then this will happen. And Jesus isn't saying that.
Mm-hmm.
He's just saying, I am bringing good news. I am proclaiming freedom for all. I
Mm-hmm.
am allowing people to see the
Yeah.
things that they need to see
Yeah.
and to, um, so proclaiming the Lord's favor had to do with, all those freedom things and releasing people from slavery. And so
Mm-hmm.
I, I'm somewhat reminded of um, I'm reminded of interviews that I've read with African American enslaved people and their
Yeah.
comments about saying, he can do what he wants to me, but I'm still free.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
um, so I think um, yeah.
I actually hear in what you're saying because you said Jesus is saying these things and other people are saying other things. Do you remember saying that a few moments, something like that? What are the other people saying? Or like, can you say a or two more about what you meant when said that?
Well, um, I guess I'm thinking about some of the um, some of the Christian uh, they're not right faith
Yeah.
traditions
Mm-hmm.
that uh, indicate that if you behave in this way, you
Mm.
will receive these gifts. And if
Right.
you don't,
Transactional.
then you're going to be punished and all
Yeah.
these horrible things will happen.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I was thinking of because
Mm.
the Pharisees and the Sadducees were like going to get rid of him,
Mm-hmm.
because he was
Yeah.
saying these things and they wanted to be the ones in control.
Sure.
And so there's always a group that thinks they should be, in
Right.
charge.
Yeah.
And Jesus came and said, just follow me,
Mm-hmm.
and he taught freedom and he taught peace and he taught cooperation and love and,
Yeah.
these things. Yeah.
And yeah, I get that. And what I hear in what you're saying, Eileen, is it kind of flips the cart and the horse. Uh,
Hmm.
is the scripture fulfilled because God, however many years before Jesus was ever born, ordained Jesus to be this guy? Or is the scripture fulfilled because Jesus is saying yes, and not just saying yes, but I mean, richer than that, is actively engaging in this work?
Hmm. Hmm.
And do you hear the difference between those two?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Makes me wonder about that. Like,
Yeah. Well, and I certainly know what it's like to be, talking about with our Justice and Mercy ministry.
yeah,
I feel I'm really pleased that we have that at Trinity and that it's active.
yeah,
And the feeling I have when I'm participating
yeah.
is so much different. So
Mm,
there's such a difference between looking at it and saying, yeah, that's a good thing, and yet actually taking
mm,
the action.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if we really believe that Jesus was a real human being, right? We proclaim that Jesus was really human and really divine. I'm going to say something that's probably a little controversial. Um, he could have said no,
Mhm.
right? If he's fully human, then that would mean he has free will, just like any of us, any of the rest of us. And so, in theory, and it's only in theory because it's not what happened, and I don't really know how it all cosmically works anyways. But in theory, he would have the same free will that you and I have,
Hmm.
and would have had the same ability to say no to God's mission,
Hmm.
right? Could have, when he was out in the wilderness and being tempted by Satan, that's only really a temptation if Jesus actually could have said, "Yeah, okay, I will turn these rocks into bread," or "You're right, Satan, I will worship you so I can be the ruler over all the like that." These are only temptations
Yeah.
if Jesus actually could have said no to God,
Hmm.
right? And so, like you're saying, it feels so much different when you engage in the ministry,
Hmm.
justice and mercy, in the example you were giving. Um, And that's a free choice you make, and we all make of do I get involved? Do I not get involved? Do I want to help my neighbor? Do I not? Do I have the bandwidth? All the things, you know. And Jesus would have had the same wrestling, the same choosing, the same, do I want to do this? This is a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and he said yes. And not just said yes, but went and did it, right?
Hmm.
I think, yeah. And I wonder if there's something about, and he went and did it. He said yes. He embodied it. And I wonder what that does to this word fulfill. Today, the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. Do you want to say something?
Well, I'm just is it fulfilled in our hearing because there's that word, because we now, we understand what it is that God and Jesus really want us to do.
Mm,
And if we understand that, then we can work towards um, freedom and the end of oppression and excellent health services, those kinds of
right.
things.
I'd even push it a step further. I don't think understanding's enough, sadly. I wonder if it is actively fulfilled every time someone
Hmm.
chooses to engage in this life,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Like I was wondering about if you wanted to say a few more words about when you said it, appreciating Trinity has these justice and mercy ministries and then engaging in them, and it feels so much different. What is that? Can you tell me more about what that is, the like actually engaging in it? What does that feel like?
Oh gosh, what does that feel like? Um, huh. Often it's fun.
Mm,
It's like
yeah,
it's fun, and then and forming relationships is good because I have some good relationships with folks who attend our services, not just the other, parishioners who are
yeah,
working on it. And it is I feel peaceful afterwards in ways that I don't really otherwise feel peaceful. So, I'm peaceful when I meditate, and
sure.
occasionally I'm peaceful when I'm pray. Often I'm like, "Rah, rah, rah,"
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, me too. Oh,
but it's it's a different feeling. It's like oh, that old comment, quote, I don't know who said it, but God's in his heavens, all is right with the world.
mm,
That's the feeling, it's like
mm,
it's that satisfaction in knowing I'm doing what I should be doing.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that makes sense to me. And I wonder if that's a kind of fulfillment.
Well, for us, definitely. I mean, for
Yeah,
me as an individual, it's definitely a feeling of fulfillment.
yeah,
Um, and it's a physical action to fulfill Christ's, request of what we
yeah,
do, or um, and I don't know, request isn't a strong enough
yeah,
word,
sure.
but
Yeah,
or
yeah. I
what
get
we're
it.
opposed to
Yeah,
being doing.
right. Guidance. Yeah,
Yeah.
directive. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right, but it's definitely both of those. I mean, so I wonder about that sense of this word fulfillment when Jesus
Hmm.
says today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing.
Hmm.
You know, is it that kind of fulfillment we're talking about? It is the satisfaction, but I want even a richer word than that.
Yeah.
The excuse me, maybe a richer word is that feeling of wholeness that comes when you truly have helped another.
And grace.
And grace. Yeah, and grace. And so I wonder about, you know, please give me some grace because I'm tempted to say something. I'm gonna say something that I don't know how I feel about it, but it's what keeps bubbling up in me. Is
Okay.
it's like I sometimes wish Christians had a similar relationship to scripture as our Jewish brothers and sisters do.
Hmm.
You know, I worry that sometimes Christians too often see Jesus as the finished product. It's done, it's complete. Jesus did it. Thank God.
Hmm.
Like I'm really glad Jesus did it, whatever it is,
Hmm.
um, for all of us, right? Versus how often, um, of course, this is not all, but many Jewish readers of Old Testament scripture, of their scripture, the Hebrew scripture, you know, see this as here's what, um, here is our collective mm, responsibility. I don't really want that word, but that's fine. Responsibility to do, right?
Hmm.
And I'm hearing that in what you're saying, right? That there's this sense of fulfillment that comes when we live in a way where we seek to set the captives free and where we seek to set the oppressed free and restore
Hmm.
sight to the blind. Um, and so it makes me wonder about could this fulfillment be an ongoing experience that can still happen to this day? The hearers could be you and I today. And it's not just when we hear, but it's when we live and we do it. It's a deeper sense of hearing. So some people say that in monastic vows, you vow to be obedient, and obedient in the Latin is to hear deeply, right?
Oh.
It's not just and if you really do hear deeply, then you do actually do, right? If you hear your abbot, your monastic, the head of the monastic order, if you hear them deeply, um, you would of course then go do what they do, but it starts with
Yes.
hearing and listening,
Here.
right? And it's not just supposed to be this like they're a dictator up top that tells you what to do and you just blindly do whatever they want you to do. It's
Hmm.
supposed to be rooted in I deeply listen to this person. And so when it says the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing, I wonder about that kind of deep listening to Christ that leads to action. It's not just I heard the words and I said, yeah, 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 that's a good idea, Jesus. but it's like I deeply heard it. It's in
Hmm.
my soul now. Seek
Yeah.
release for the captives. Um, let the oppressed go free. And that there's something about every time someone does that, is this scripture fulfilled? Is the fulfilling an ongoing experience rather than a one time, it's done. And I think that's sometimes the difference between how Christians and Jewish people can read scripture. That I think sometimes our Jewish neighbors are better equipped to see it as an ongoing reality, and Christians sometimes get stuck with it's done. It was this guy Jesus, and that's the answer done, right? And as that
Mhm.
it sort of stops there.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah. I'm just the phrase that flits through my mind is um, when we go to Passover,
yeah.
they're leaving comments to each other are, next year in Jerusalem
Yes.
with that, that anticipation and that expectation and that grace
Yeah.
that life will move forward, our belief will move forward, our practice will move forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Well, seeing our time and having this conversation, I'm going to read the passage one more time. I'll share screen again, and we'll just do a final reflection on what is the Spirit saying to us? What are you and I taking away from this today? I
Okay.
want to embody. Oof. Luke chapter 4. Jesus, filled with the power of the Spirit, returned to Galilee, and a report about him spread through all the surrounding country. He began to teach in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." And I wonder, Eileen, what you hear Spirit inviting you to today in this scripture.
I think it's a type of invitation from Jesus to look carefully at how my life and my actions um, fulfill this, fulfill what he said he wanted to do, which
Mm,
is bringing good news and um, being of service and um, taking care of yourself.
mhm,
All these different things, um,
mm,
and it's also a call to identify what I think God calls me to versus what my um, ego or um, you know emotions or whatever think, yeah, that would be a good thing. And
mm.
maybe do a little bit more stopping in and being quiet and going, okay, now, is this me or is this you? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, your audio is shifting a little bit. So let me make sure I heard you right. It sounds like for you, this was sort of an invitation. This is an invitation to do that kind of daily examine, that introspection of um, how am I living my life, and does my life reflect these things we read that Jesus quotes in Isaiah, or does my life reflect other priorities? And um, am I hearing that right? Yeah.
The balance.
And there's a balance, of course.
Yeah.
And I like that you um, highlight that taking care of yourself. The proclaiming the year of the Lord's favor makes me think of the about the Jubilee year, the year in um, I guess in Torah, but the notion that there's a year set aside where everyone just sort of relaxes, for lack of a better word. I think there are better words, but the land is allowed to rest, the people rest, the debts are forgiven, people are freed from the burden um of responsibilities. Um, and yeah, so I think about that, and maybe that's where that taking care of yourself slips into this passage, right? In that year of the Lord's favor. Um, but yeah, yeah. I think that's right. I think for me, this passage invites me, and our conversation around it invites me to keep searching for, keep seeking those places and moments of fulfillment now, and um I'm drawn to that idea of ongoing fulfillment, right? The fulfillment is not a one-time event, but is rather a uh, something even I can participate in, but is an ongoing reality. And to seek that, to look for those things, to try to put my hope in that rather than I don't know, I'm with you. If I can certainly look at the current events of the world and feel rather cynical about, well, the work's not done, you know, and how can I flip that in myself and say, where is the work still being fulfilled, and how can I participate in that? Uh, yeah. Well, thank you, Eileen.
Thank you, Alex.
I enjoyed talking with you. I hope this was helpful to you.
Yes, yes, it
Yeah,
was. Thank you very much.
good. Well, I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you on Sunday.
All right. Take
All right.
care. Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.